Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, and Quinshon Judkins all have great opportunities to be massive draft values this year. But do the Browns have a quarterback on their roster that is capable of supporting these guys to success? We dig into the top 3 storylines for the Cleveland Browns entering 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today, we are going to be discussing all things Cleveland Browns. So every team is getting their own episode, and we're going through the top 3 storylines. And it's time to finish up the AFC North with the Browns. Yes, we even have to discuss the Cleveland Browns. And this team is really hard to figure out this year for fantasy. And it all comes down to who is going to be their starting quarterback, right? Because Jerry Jeudy had a nice breakout year last year. David Njoku has been very solid for fantasy. And then Quinshon Judkins gets drafted early in the second round and has very little competition for touches. So there is hope for this team to have quite a few good fantasy assets. It's just, is there a quarterback that can actually support them? There's 4 quarterbacks right now that are all competing to be the starter this season. It starts with Joe Flacco, old man Joe Flacco, who they gave a very small contract to this year to come back, 1 year, $4 million. Kenny Pickett, who they traded for this offseason. Dillon Gabriel, who they drafted in the 3rd round. And then rookie Shedeur Sanders, of course, who's right now at the bottom of this quarterback depth chart, 5th round pick. He was supposed to be, a 1st round pick and kept falling. It is funny because when you look at consensus rankings for fantasy, Shedeur Sanders is actually the highest drafted guy right now at quarterback 33. So none of these guys are going in the top 32. Joe Flacco second at quarterback 35, Pickett at quarterback 42, and Dillon Gabriel at quarterback 45. Yes, Deshaun Watson's still also on this roster, but Reed tore his Achilles and is a disaster. Yeah. So no one thinks he's going to be starting another game with the Cleveland Browns. Now, Vinny, who do you think will win the starting job to start the season? And do you think that quarterback will keep the job all year round, or will someone else end up finishing the year as a starter?
Well, it's funny, Michelle, because if his name was Shedeur Smith or anything other than Sanders, would we be talking about a 5th round pick like being the favorite to win a starting job in a room, not only that you have a couple of veterans, one they traded for, and a guy taken in the draft 2 rounds earlier? I don't think so, right? But it's Sanders. And the other reason we're thinking about it is look at the collective group here: Flacco, Pickett, and Gabriel. Gabriel himself is rather developmental. It shocked people that he went ahead of Sanders a whole 2 rounds. And Gabriel's got some athleticism, but there's a lot of things he needs to develop. He's undersized as well. So I think it comes down to Kevin Stefanski and his job security. Who does he want out there that's going to help him keep his job? They didn't have a very good offensive system last year. They had to make a change under him, moving away from Ken Dorsey, going to Tommy Rees right now to help consult with the play calling. So if you look at Stefanski, there's a lot riding on this because I think it was an extension, right? I think they gave him a bit of a pass with all their injuries they had, and they were a really good playoff team just the year prior, right, with a bunch of different guys starting at quarterback, including Joe Flacco. So there might be a little bit of affinity toward Flacco because of what he's done. And who was the guy last year? James Winston. Very similar to Flacco in terms of an aging guy who has a big arm and not afraid to gunsling downfield. And coincidentally, we saw those years from Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy. So this is really hard to break down. The only thing I'm pretty sure about is that Gabriel's not going to win the job. I think they like him, but I think there's a lot to be done here with his skill set to really feel comfortable. Now, the other thing is, do they want to carry the other 3 quarterbacks here and go forward? So I would say if everyone stinks, I think you would say Joe Flacco is going to start because he's the least disturbing of these options in terms of facilitating the offense, getting the running game going, playing behind that offensive line, playing off the defense, and just trying to be just competent in throwing downfield. Now, if they want to go a little bit risky, I think it's Kenny Pickett because, again, He's got some athleticism, can throw downfield, but he's going to have to straight up win the job over Sanders. So that's the one thing he has where we think Sanders can run. That's not true. I mean, that's a misconception. He is a decent guy who can move around the pocket, but Pickett would be the best athlete that isn't Gabriel of this three. So I just look at it and I have no idea. I think they want Sanders to be motivated and go and snatch a job, but reality might say Flacco has to be the guy here to try to win games. So that's what they have to do here with Stefanski. I don't think you're going to win games with the two younger guys, and Pickett could just be a kind of a volatile disaster. So I think it's going to be Flacco, and I think he's the best possible scenario for our targets to have some success this season.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it has to be Joe Flacco that's going to win this job because Kenny Pickett has already been struggling, and Kenny Pickett's just not good, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't
he's
even
not
really
good.
understand why they traded for him in the first place. I mean, Pickett has started 24 games throughout his NFL career, and it's around 15 touchdowns. Like, that would be the worst case scenario for any of these guys for him to win, or Dillon Gabriel. I don't even think Dillon Gabriel has a chance to win this job to start. Third round picks just don't get a chance normally, right? Like, that's not really, he's a third round pick for a reason. And you can say, well, Shedeur Sanders is a fifth round pick for a reason, but it's not due to talent. That's the thing with Sanders. It was all due to his attitude and all the baggage that comes with him that he kept dropping and dropping. He just was off team sports completely. Now that's a whole other issue, but Sanders, I do think, is probably the most among the young guys, and Pickett, Gabriel, and Sanders, the most talented, ready to go guy this year. I just don't think they're going to hand him the job week one. And honestly, they would make history if he did, or somewhat history. There's only been one quarterback to start in week one that was drafted in a fifth round or later since the 1970 NFL merger. And that was all the way back in 1977 for the Buccaneers. Randy Hedberg. He started 4 games as a rookie, including week one. Absolute disaster, and never started another game in his career. It was terrible. So Sanders would be making history if he was able to actually start week one. I don't think it happens, but I do think by mid-season we see Sanders take over. Now, when it comes to fantasy, though, I do think Joe Flacco would be the best case scenario for these guys with Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku. We've seen Joe Flacco the last 2 years with the Browns in 2023 and with the Colts last season. And guys like Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, and we know what he did with Amari Cooper. Like, all these guys had really big games with Joe Flacco and his, handful of starts. So I do think he would be the best case scenario to win this job for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, Shedeur Sanders, I think they do want him to go out and outright play well enough to win the job. You'd think they want kind of a pocket passer in the system. We go back to Kevin Stefanski's best pupil here, so to speak. He was an older guy at the time, but Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, that was probably his best case example of a strong guy, pocket passer that really succeeded in his offense. That wasn't in Cleveland. So I look at it again. You're right. I think they're going to do a full evaluation at some point. I think it maybe starts out with Flacco so they can save a little bit of respect and face here early in the season. Then they're going to be like, we need to see what we have in Pickett, Gabriel, and Sanders at some point. And then if this all doesn't work out, we need to blow it up and hope for Arch Manning or whatever next year when we're looking in the top of the draft. So I think they need to be in full evaluation mode at some point. But first, they're in win mode to save the job. I don't think it's going to help either way in the end if you play any of these guys. But they might be okay because of their defense, and they might look at, hey, 2 years ago, Deshaun Watson went down and we were okay and we made the playoffs with Flacco. So they might have that in the back of their head, right, to say this is something that we're going to think about. So, again, we'll see how it plays out. But, again, the bottom line is you're not doing anything with this except a super flex deep league play that you've got to play somebody. If you're in a league where there's like 16 teams, you're going to have to start a Browns quarterback from week to week. But that's the only way to look at it, because in terms of backup or upside or kind of matchup playing, you really can't trust any of these guys.
Yeah, and I'll say whoever starts week one, they're going to have a hard time keeping the job. This is the Browns' first 7 games. The Bengals, Ravens, Packers, Lions, Vikings, Steelers, Dolphins, and then they play the Patriots, which will be a coin toss flip, and then they're bye. So I do think they're going to lose a lot of games to start, and whoever's starting quarterback will probably end up getting benched. However, with all those tough games, they will have to throw a lot, and if it's Joe Flacco, he's going to throw it up, making Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku very, very interesting. So let's talk about them. their rankings and if we are interested in their value in this upcoming season. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery, and now I budget smarter and save more. Plus, managing my money with my partner has never been smoother. We are able to track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Vinny, let's figure out if we want to draft Jerry Jeudy or David Njoku at cost this year and if they're a good value or not. So Jerry Jeudy is sitting at wide receiver 35 in consensus rankings. He was the wide receiver 15 in total points last year, but wide receiver 29 on average. So much different there. You know, the average is really what I want to look at. And I think that's more to show what he did last season. However, the second half of the year is when he really broke out once he got Jameis Winston. And if he gets Joe Flacco, it's kind of that similar type of quarterback.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the Browns, for a team where they don't have a lot of guys that were interested in wide receiver, they have a lot of vacated targets, 235 from overall and 156 at wide receiver. So Jerry Jeudy actually could be in more demand here to get the ball in his hands. Now, let's look at it from this perspective. We know Flacco could recreate what he had with Cooper. Cooper and Jeudy are kind of cut from the same cloth, Alabama prospects. Jeudy was the guy that was trusted by Winston. So you think the interchange would say Judy's going to see a lot of targets if Flacco were to start. Now, if it's one of the younger guys, I think they'd also throw to Jeudy because I think he did a good job of getting open last year. Now, you might have a little bit teeter towards David Njoku being the tight end and the security blanket. He might cut in a little bit more to what Jeudy does. But as I just mentioned, there's a ton of wide receiver targets to go around. So Jeudy has to see a race profile. Like, I don't think there's a choice here. And he finally established himself. Look, he had some flashes with the Broncos, but really saw kind of come into his own and what we thought he could be. A little bit of guy that lines up on the outside sometimes, works in the slot, gets open when you need him, kind of based on volume. So I think this is kind of low for him. When you look at it, when he's wide receiver 29, we're dropping him 6 spots. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense when he's needed more at wide receiver and is going to be treated more like the go-to guy because you have limited potential quarterback options that aren't Flacco. And we know Flacco and Winston both were all about one guy and really feeding that. So Flacco does have the chemistry with Njoku, so something we look at, but that all tells me Njoku and Jeudy are best off with Flacco to really live up to what they're doing. But I think it really depends on who the other quarterback is. But I think Judy's just undervalued to me. I think Njoku is more, you're not going to get a value. Who might be just right there at tight end 10 there. I just don't think you're going to get the duplication from last year's numbers. So I think getting the tight end 10 in that area is a pretty good cost for him. I think it's been adjusted a little bit enough. But I think Jeudy has been dropped down too much the other way.
Yeah, and I mean, Jeudy had to play with some bad quarterbacks last year, and Bailey Zappi
Yeah.
and Deshaun Watson and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and he did get a handful of games with Jameis Winston, where Winston, it's not like he was a great quarterback, but was throwing it up to him. I will say, so like I said, the wide receiver 29 on average last year with 11.5 points per game and half PPR. But the second half of the year, he really did fully break out. From weeks 11 through 18, he was averaging 101 receiving yards per game and 16.2 points per game. That was 8th among wide receivers and fantasy points per game during that span. So I do think wide receiver 35 rank is too low for him. Now, he's going to have to, he's definitely going to be that target. You're going to have to depend on a ton of targets from him for him to be successful because of the quarterbacks. But like you said, I mean, there's so many targets to go around. Elijah Moore was second on this team in targets last year at 102. He's gone. You have Amari Cooper gone. He only played 6 games there, but already had 53 targets in those 6 games, and he's gone. So definitely interesting. I'll say right now he's around other wide receiver ones like Calvin Ridley and maybe Tedero McMillan or Khalil Shakir. I do like Jerry Jeudy more than those guys. Maybe McMillan has a higher ceiling, but I do think Jeudy is the safest among that bunch, even with the bad quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm not sure McMillan because we have Buka turning some heads in the Buccaneers camp. So he actually has a bit of competition for his role, where Jeudy somehow with this situation that's less competition. Now, Jeudy is not going to be a big touchdown guy. You're not going to get that, but receptions, I mean, if you're in half or full point PPR, that's where we're going to rack up some really good points with Jerry Jeudy. I think there's going to be a lot of games where he's going to have to make those receptions add up to 100 yards. So I think he has a handful of those games here with whoever is the quarterback. So really think Jeudy is in a good spot. Now you have Cedric Tillman and Deontay Johnson. I guess Deontay Johnson continues to punch his I got to play for every AFC North team except the Bengals card. So when we're looking at this, I don't think any of those guys are going to intrigue me at all. Cedric Tillman, we saw flash a little bit. We thought he was going to do more without Amari Cooper in the mix. That didn't materialize. So this is just it's just so hard to trust any receiver that isn't Jeudy. So again, maybe it comes back to Jeudy and Njoku, and maybe it's simplified, right? You just have a lot of targets to these two guys, short and intermediate routes, and then you do a lot of the running game.
Yeah, I do think Cedric Tillman, all the way at wide receiver 62, if you're in a super deep league, he can become interesting if Joe Flacco wins. He didn't get much opportunity last year besides that stretch of like week 7 through 11. And he was actually really good, 14 points, 25 points, 16.5 points, and then a bad game with 6.2. And then he gets hurt in week 12, concussion, out for the rest of the season. I do think he's interesting at that rank in very deep leagues. But yeah, if you're in a normal like 5 bench league, then you're probably not going to consider drafting him. Now with David Njoku right now, he ranks as the tight end 10. And I think that might be a good value. I mean, yes, there's inconsistency there with David Njoku, but he has shown flashes of big games. And most tight ends are very inconsistent. He was the tight end 5 on average last year, played 11 games. He was a tight end 7 on average in 2023, but we saw him kill it with Joe Flacco in 2023 at the end of the year. And then last year, it did start slow because of the injury. He got injured in week 1, missed weeks 2 through 4, came back slowly from the injury weeks 5 and 6. But then weeks 7 through 16, before getting injured again in week 16, he averaged 12.8 points per game. That was more than what Brock Bowers averaged last year. So I do think David Njoku actually could be a really good value, even though it is always risky to draft him.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of what we used to have recently. It was a very short period of time with the Jaguars, right? With Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram being the targets of note here, work in the middle. I think you could see massive usage of both of these guys. And again, I don't think you'll get a bad pick with Njoku. You might get a value out of it. I mean, you look at that tight end 7 through 11, that range. I think he's going to finish somewhere there based on the tight end landscape. Again, it may not be as many points as you're looking for in relation to maybe a top 5 tight end, but he's still very viable for fantasy and what you're going to get. So again, just looking at this situation, I don't know how they can't trust these guys most, given the nature of what type of receivers they are as well, right? The guys who can get open and kind of not worry too much about stretching the field. It's going to be some dinking and dunking and playing off the running game. And if someone's going to stretch it, however, I think it's Flacco or Sanders. So I think that's why we need one of them to start just to make sure the offense opens up for these routes for Njoku and Jeudy.
Yeah. Now we have to figure out this backfield. Last year, none of it really worked out. Jerome Ford, was the most successful, finishing as the running back 34 in total points. He is still on the roster, but Nick Chubb is gone. And they drafted Quinshon Judkins early in the second round. It seems like, with their early draft pick of taking him, he should be the workhorse back. But do we think we're going to use him that way? And is he ranked too low right now at running back 29? These are all questions we will answer right after we take a quick break. Before we finish up talking about the Cleveland Browns and their top 3 storylines, I want to just thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, let's talk about Quinshon Judkins here, because right now he's sitting at running back 29 in the rankings, but it does seem like he's coming into a situation where unless he absolutely stinks, he should easily get 200 carries this upcoming year. Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb pretty much split the workload last season, 104 carries for Ford, 102 for Chubb. Ford's efficiency was fine, but it just wasn't working out for them last year. I do actually like Judkins as a prospect. He's athletic enough to be a workhorse back, I believe, and he has the size at 5'11", 221 pounds. We saw the production in school, even when he had to split the backfield with TreVeyon Henderson at Ohio State last season. So what do you think about Judkins, and do you think his ranking's just too low?
Yeah, I was going to just say that when you look at the Browns, I thought they were going to end up with TreVeyon Henderson or Quinshon Judkins in their backfield. I mean, not just because both went to Ohio State and it's convenient to draft a player from there if you're the Browns, but also the style of running and what they're trying to replace. And I think Judkins gave them a little bit more versatility, right? They had that thing rolling a few years ago with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, where you had Chubb early down, power, finish drives. Kareem Hunt could be a super sub when needed, extended work, or he could be a very effective receiving back, right? And we know teams are creatures of habit and they want to recreate something that worked, right? Except in this situation, I think they want to have maybe a workhorse here where they're not maybe telegraphing the plays. I think they've seen Jerome Ford and what he can do. I think he's out. I just see him as a backup that they can count on a few times to give a breather. He's a bit of a swing guy, so they can use in the multiple situations here. So he is a valuable backup, but we saw last year he proved to not be anything more than a valuable backup, right? That's what his role is if you overexpose him. Some backs are just not capable of doing that. Some backs are plug and play, right? Like a Zach Charbonnet, but he is not built that way to do that. So when I look at this backfield, they did kind of get their version of Kareem Hunt and Dylan Sampson later in the draft. But Sampson is an undersized guy, still learning everything. He's going to have to prove himself in pass protection, especially if it's a younger quarterback starting out there, a rookie. They're not going to just put him out there. I think with Judkins, he's a plug-and-play running back. He can do everything. He can pass protect when you need. He can catch the ball when you need it. He can reel off the explosive runs, and he can power through and score. We know he was a very good scoring back between the tackles. That's the Nick Chubb element that we see here. So, yeah, I think this is really undervalued. RB29, I think this is really low because this is a team that wants to run. They're going to run to take pressure off whoever's the quarterback. Their offensive line, yeah, it's broken down a little bit, but they're still a kind of a run-first team that needs to set up the passing. And they can also keep Judkins on the field for 3 downs if needed here and kind of sub in forward. So I would watch for the reports on Judkins, how much they want to give him the ball, see what they do with him in the preseason. If they're very careful with his usage, I would say they're resting him for the regular season and want to give him a big workload. So there's a lot of things you can still read into as we get through minicamp and training camp. But the talent, the opportunity are there for Judkins to be a very solid RB2 and a lot higher and more valuable than flex play this season.
Yeah, it's really interesting because right now he's the furthest among these rookie running backs that we expect to be involved this year. So Amarian Hampton's the highest at running back 21. Mm-hmm. He has to compete with Najee Harris. Then it's TreVeyon Henderson, who was his old teammate. Running back 25, he has to compete with Ramondre Stevenson. Mm-hmm. RJ Harvey at running back 27 now has to compete with J.K. Dobbins in Denver. And then Caleb Johnson, yeah, we figure he'll be the clear lead back for Pittsburgh as long as he doesn't disappoint greatly. But later, drafted a bit later than Judkins, and he has to compete with Jaylen Warren. Judkins has to compete with Jerome Ford. I don't know. I think Judkins should maybe be the highest of this group because he was drafted highly. He's very talented, and he's going to get the opportunity. So, yes, I do think he's a great value this year. That will be it for today's show. We will be back on Friday discussing a new division. Let's move to the AFC West. Why not? We'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs on Friday and get through the rest of the teams next week. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.